It's amazing how whenever you bring up reconciliation, in about 80% of cases, you will see a visible reaction on people's faces. You can hear stories about companies actually having to delay going public because of an inability to pass audits.
Tal Kirschenbaum, CEO and co-founder of Ledge. Ledge is working to revolutionize the way finance teams operate. Before founding Ledge, Tal refined his expertise in BCG, Facebook, and Melio.
It is a process of figuring out as a business how much of the transactions and payments occurred in the way that you expect them. If anything went wrong, what is it? Why? Call out any discrepancies, investigate, resolve them, as well as ensure that you're accurately reflecting those in your accounting books.
Thinking through your journey here, do you always know that you were going to be an entrepreneur?
For me, there's only one way and one metric of actually succeeding, which is...
Welcome to today's episode of 5 to 50. I am very excited for this one. I'm excited to welcome Tal Kirschenbaum, CEO and co-founder of Ledge. Ledge is working to revolutionize the way finance teams operate with its AI-powered platform that dramatically improves efficiency in cash reconciliation and journal entry creation. That's speaking my language here. Before founding Ledge, Tal refined his expertise in finance and technology at notable companies like BCG, Facebook, and Melio, bringing a wealth of experience to his entrepreneurial ventures, which he is leveraging right now. Under his leadership, Ledge has become a pivotal solution for businesses looking to enhance their financial operations. Today, we'll explore Tal's journey from strategy consulting to tech innovation and dive deep into how Ledge is setting a new pace and standards in the fintech space. Tal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be.
So I want to take a little bit of a step back before we get into Ledge, but talk about you as a leader and thinking through your journey here. Did you always know that you were going to be an entrepreneur, or did it just find you?
No, I really never really had any other option. I come from a background of entrepreneurs. My father is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. I think he started more than 30 different companies. And for me, there's, for good and bad, only one way and one metric of actually succeeding, which is that I built something myself, which was able to add value and succeed on its own.
Wow. And so how young did you have the bug? Would you say how young were you when you can remember that you wanted to?
Honestly, I really cannot remember a time when I thought I would be eventually doing anything else. I think almost every job interview I've had, when people would ask me, what's your long-term plan? I would, very honestly say, I would like to be an entrepreneur at some point. And so it's always been leading up to this point for me.
Awesome. Did you always find yourself kind of questioning decisions of your superiors or leadership and trying to think, hey, I would do it a different way?
I think there's always valuable lessons to be learned, either from watching people do things in a certain way or thinking through how perhaps they could be done differently. I really did have the great fortune of being able to learn from pretty amazing entrepreneurs, managers, leaders in general. So I try to take a lot of that with me.
Awesome. And so you referenced it a little bit, but your career has spanned, many big successful companies, BCG, Facebook, Melio. What was the aha moment that made you realize that financial operations needed an AI-powered solution and got you into Ledge, or got you to start Ledge?
It was during my time at Melio. Melio is a payments company, a Bill.com competitor that does AP and AR automation solutions for SMBs. And Melio shares a lot of the challenges that I think many companies share, in the sense that, it has a high transaction volume as part of its day-to-day operations and business. And it also has some complexity, in its case, leveraging multiple different methods of payments across multiple different banks, payment processors, having to align its core activity with, of course, its accounting books at the end of the day. That description fits many companies that I think both of us can easily think of.
Yep.
The interesting about Melio, though, is that it's a payments company. And so when it faced challenges around its finance operations, it was actually able to allocate one of its key assets, which is its engineering group, into developing an internal infrastructure to help solve its finance operations. This is a luxury, a benefit that very few companies have, although many need. And so that was really kind of the aha moment, the genesis. And I remember specifically actually talking to a marketplace, a public marketplace, and hearing from them how they suffer from the exact same challenges as Melio did, but were completely unable to do anything about it. And so if I had to really boil it down to a singular moment, it would be that.
Gotcha. And so let's talk about the challenges you're trying to solve and what happened in your mind post this conversation to send you on the journey to solve it.
It was essentially the process of thinking through these very common sets of challenges that companies struggle with, and then thinking through how could you actually go about solving them in a way that is going to be scalable, both by being broadly applicable, but also by simply being relevant, I think, to multiple different types of segments, sectors, types of users as well. And so there was a process, of course, which I think is pretty common for entrepreneurs in terms of ideation and validation, and it's this continuous process of course correction.
Yep.
Over a period of time.
And so what are those one or two problems that you need to explain to your son or daughter that you're solving on a day-to-day basis through Ledge?
It is, if anyone were to talk to their kids about reconciliation, for some reason, that would be the one thing I would probably call out. It really is a process of figuring out as a business how much of the transactions and payments that you deal with, in fact, occurred in the way that you expect them to have occurred. If anything went wrong, what is it? Why? Call out any discrepancies and, of course, investigate, resolve them, as well as ensure that you're accurately reflecting those in your accounting books.
Yeah.
So that really is kind of the crux of what we do, the bread and butter for us. It is reconciliation across its multiple different kind of facets.
Yeah. I have painful memories of myself and my partner, Larry Bernstein, up at 2 a.m. trying to reconcile a Stripe transaction report to invoices, to cash received, and hours and hours and hours of trying to figure out what happened, how to record revenue. And it's a very common problem that it's great to hear that you're solving that.
I have to say it's truly hundreds of finance leaders and professionals that we've been in touch with, have supported over the past couple of years. It's amazing how whenever you bring up reconciliation, in about 80% of cases, you will see a visible reaction on people's faces, which, the story that you're sharing is one of the really core competencies that we have. That exact flow, by the way, that you discussed, from invoice to payment processor, Stripe in your case, to settling it to the bank, and then finally reflecting that into the general ledger. And it's always that case. And a story always comes up about, we're getting ready for an audit. You can hear stories about companies actually having to delay going public because of an inability to pass audits and so on and so on. So I don't know if it's any consolation, but it is a very, very common thing that 100%. We hear from companies we work with.
Yeah, and for the entrepreneurs listening to this, the non-accountants, effectively what we're talking about is making sure the revenue that you're recording in your books actually matches to the revenue you earned and to cash eventually, or to collections. And it sounds really simple, but if you just go to a payment processor to collect, there's timing differences, there's fees, there's a whole slew credit memos, there's a whole slew of reasons why the revenue that you're going to be reporting in your financials might be different from what happens on a transaction log from a payment processor. And so you really need to make sure you have the right eyes or the right systems in place to make sure you're reporting the right numbers. So let's put on your entrepreneurial hat, and let's think through. I want to hear about Ledger's early days and some challenges in building this business, not so much the technology, but what are some things that surprised you about being an entrepreneur in the early days, going from employee to wearing a bunch of hats?
Absolutely. I think it's pretty interesting because, we also straddle both categories. The first being enterprise SaaS, the second being fintech. And I think that presents pretty unique challenges and differences as well. One of the reasons is part of what we do, we integrate with our customers' entire infrastructures as it pertains to their banks, payment processors, their accounting systems, their internal databases, data warehouses, and so on and so on. And that, of course, brings a lot of complexity from an integration, trust, data security, compliance perspective. And we had to get very good early on at doing these integrations, which sometimes is quite challenging, especially with banks, which are notoriously, of course, challenging to work with from a compliance perspective and notoriously inconsistent as well. So we had to build this pretty robust system that ensured financial data, both accuracy as well as auditability, which, as we all know, is one of the key pillars in our profession, right? One of the things that we had going for benefit as an advantage was really the experience that we were able to bring in from previous companies, primarily Melio, which was just an amazing school and use case and point of reference really around operational pain points that finance teams face on a daily basis. And that is due to its nature being a payments company that deals with very, very substantial scale. And I have to say that experience and that perspective really shaped our focus on automation, accuracy, really from day one.
Gotcha. And so, but going from Melio at the time where it was, when you left, Melio was a decently sized company. What were some of the challenges that building a startup, what are some challenges you encountered from going from a big company where, it has its big company problems, but you didn't have to, set up payroll. You didn't have to set up your own accounting systems. You didn't have to worry about funding the rent. What are some of the challenges? Do you have a story that come to mind where it's like, oh, I'm not at the big company anymore?
Yeah. This isn't Kansas anymore. I think for us, a few of those moments, one of them, which is, your typical kind of bureaucratic moment, setting up bank accounts. We do R&D in Tel Aviv, Israel. We have go-to-market in the US. We've got a parent US entity, subsidiary based in Israel. And setting up bank accounts for the Israeli subsidiary, getting that funded at a time where we already had a term sheet signed with investors who were actually waiting on us to figure out the bureaucracy to start wiring the funds for us. That for me was kind of those moments where it was like, well, there is definitely a good amount of overhead involved in this process. I think luckily now there are quite a few different solutions that are there to help alleviate some of that pain. Stripe Atlas, for example, is a great solution for setting up entities. But that for me was one of those first kind of moments of realization of some of the day-to-day challenges, and that of course is apart from, I think, the very broad focus or broad range of things that you have to focus on rather early on, thinking through, as you mentioned, kind of fundraising, thinking through product strategy, hiring, setting the right company culture, building the right processes in place. And as you mentioned, the smallest company I was a part of prior to my experience founding Ledge was at its smallest a 70-person company, which is not Facebook, true, it's smaller, but still is an established company and one that was growing, doing quite well. So it was quite a bit of an adjustment, But on the other, the other side of it, the flip side of it was being able to shape a culture of an organization, which I thought was, and still think is one of the best things that myself, my co-founder, get to do.
That's awesome. So you're able to do that from ground zero, which is amazing. What are the learnings that you brought when we're talking about culture from your experience and your own history that you're looking to instill in Ledge?
One of the key things I was fortunate to learn, and this actually in a place that you don't expect to learn, this specific lesson, which is actually in two places, both at Facebook as well as I served as I'm an Israeli citizen. As Israelis, we serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. Both of those places, one of the key things that are highlighted, believe it or not, are different forms of accountability and ownership. At Facebook, one of the key things was having a founder mentality. And I absolutely love that. It's thinking through your day-to-day challenges from a perspective of founder, irrespective of your actual title, position, ownership perspective. And that, for me as a founder, is the best thing I can hope that any of the people on my team will have. And the best, of course, do have and are able to leverage that mentality in an amazing way. And so I think that for me was one.
And do you find that mentality can be learned, or is it something innate?
It's a good question. I think both. I think some people just have that mentality, and I think for others, it's really easily coachable and learnable.
Yeah, gotcha. Something that we're trying to learn ourselves as we grow our business, and then we work with our clients to help them as they are deciding between candidates to bring onto their business and analyze performance as they scale. So it's always a question I think back to. So let's talk about the financial processes at Ledge or the clients you serve. What is an example of kind of one common misstep that you see companies like experience consistently and something that you can do to prevent it?
So one that's top of mind for us, which obviously we have the bias of focusing on automation, is really, you've got to find this balance between the 80-20 balance, right? Between building and being able to rely on something that's good enough for the time being versus being able to properly plan ahead for growth, for expansion, for good times and bad times, right? We like to think of ourselves as scrappy whenever we can be, and we think that's absolutely fantastic. Our customers do the same. They should. I think at the same time, keeping in mind the actual costs that you incur by staying overly scrappy, by working in this fire drill mode of just, trying to stay on top of everything that's going on without realizing that with a minimal amount of investment, you can actually set yourself up to be so much better off. It's this concept of, early small investments can really end up paying massive dividends in the future. I'll give you my silly example, which you probably are able to relate to early on in my career, getting up to speed on financial modeling. One of the things you learn is, in Excel, you should rely only on your keyboard as much as you can. Learn the keyboard shortcuts, learn, the different hacks, because it's going to save you so much time later on. And as a concept, I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, well, funny story where when I started my career, the story they would always tell is back before, now everyone has a wireless mouse, but first day on the job, all the analysts
would take your mouse
and they would cut the mouse cord in front of them and say, now you got to figure it out. And so it's definitely a steep learning curve, but it pays dividends in the end if you could do it.
Absolutely.
And talking back about those small investments, there's always a trade-off, right? And you have this a lean startup mentality, test everything, stay small, stay scrappy, find product market fit. But there comes a time in every business where you have to start acting like a big company in order to become a big company. Have you guys found that perspective, or how do you approach determining when it's time to invest and start maybe taking a big step up and bringing on maybe more experienced team members to help build out infrastructure or operate infrastructure that may be 6 months or a year ahead of where you need to be, but help you get to where you're going faster?
So I think it's a combination of a few things for us. And, this is from our own experience. I'm sure that there are quite a few other different tactics and hacks that you can leverage. The way we do it is a combination of a few different things. First of all is trying to be open for any feedback and advice that we can get from people around us, being investors, advisors, some of our very experienced people on the team. So we try to lean pretty heavily on them, and we try to stay open and receptive to anyone saying, hey, you should probably start thinking about bringing someone new onto the team, or maybe investing in a certain process, and so on and so on. So that's one way we do it. The other way we do it is we try to have cadences, especially my co-founder and I, usually at least once a quarter, of taking kind of a step back and running through the list of things that we think are holding us back. Whenever either an immediate need jumps out, or whenever we've identified the same thing a couple different times and it's top of mind, it's a high priority for us, that's usually a good indication. And this really is a process that you can set up to help formalize this identification of such a need. So those are a few things that we've done so far that I think have been pretty successful. And every now and then reality will jolt you into action as well, right? That happens as well.
Yeah, you can only plan so much, right? And sometimes there's fires that you just have to put out. Are you tracking metrics on a regular basis and then using that quarterly cadence to analyze the prior 3 months? Or how often are you reflecting on numbers that are produced by the finance and business intelligence team?
I'll give you the annoying answer as an ex-consultant. It depends. Some things we track on a quarterly basis. We've got a pretty robust process, a quarterly business review by which department by department and then company-wide, we look at different metrics versus the targets that we've set ahead of time. We try to do, the thorough, thoughtful process of figuring out why we see that sometimes we're off track, on track, or we're actually ahead of schedule. So that's true, I think, for company-wide and department-wide. In some specific areas, we want to be even more granular than that. So as an example, on the sales side, we do weekly pipeline reviews where we review both the go-to-market machine, as an engine, looking at the different stages of the pipeline, conversion rates, different duration as part of the broader sales cycle. And then we also, of course, review individual deals. On the marketing side, we have monthly reviews. Same goes for measuring where we are in terms of delivery and actually providing value to customers as well. So those are the few different cadences that we've set up to date, at least.
Awesome. And we've seen throughout the past 4 or 5 years, there's been a rebalancing of growth at all costs versus path to profitability. And now it seems like we're kind of both back to growth a little bit based on investor appetite. How do you think through the prospects of aggressive growth versus general financial health for Ledge?
I think it's no longer the WeWork days, the grow at all costs. Don't even think about the business model. Don't even think about profitability. Mm-hmm. But I think you're right to call out that we're probably now when we think of this as a range, as a spectrum, have skewed back to the point of optimizing for growth over optimizing for profitability, sustainability of the business. As a venture-funded company that expects to remain venture-funded for, call it the near to medium term, it is, as you said, a balancing act So it's getting to growth as the primary objective, but also doing it in a hopefully more responsible, long-term viable way than perhaps some extreme examples that we've seen in the past.
Right. Making sure that you can actually get to profitability eventually. It doesn't have to be right now, but you can improve those unit economics. You can maintain customers. You can have net revenue retention over time. All those metrics mean real things to a business, right?
They absolutely do. And by the way, in the quarterly business reviews that we have, those all are tracked. These are all metrics that we track. We're kind of mindful of them. We discuss certain things, initiatives that we could take on internally to start thinking about, okay, how can we improve gross margins and so on and so on. When you think about cloud computing optimization, and it's almost never a question of should we do it, should we not do it. It's always a question of when is the right point in time, which relates back to that balancing act that you mentioned.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's talk about AI a bit. Finance teams are notoriously hesitant to change anything. And as we're seeing with our clients or just other firms, they're hesitant to embrace AI at all because of the potential to hallucinate. How did you design Ledge to automate tasks that include AI driven financial decision making within the process, and how do you convince finance teams to trust the process?
Yeah, that's been a huge focus for us, and I think the market has evolved as well over the past couple of years, right? And I think 2 years ago, a lot of hesitation, even reluctance towards adopting AI in general, sometimes even automation. It's quite different today. I think many finance leaders today understand that this is where we're all headed towards as societies, as businesses, as organizations, and there's so much to be gained from it that it's actually worth exploring how you should exactly be doing so in a responsible way where you can rely on trust. So for us, we realize that finance professionals, for them, it's not just about automation. It's about transparency, control, auditability. All these are key components in trust at the end of the day that we can provide to our customers, and not just have a black box, which is titled AI, which we can't explain. So for us, we prioritize explainability in AI, which means that our platform doesn't just process the transactions and the data around it, but it provides clear reasoning behind recommendations, and that ensures that teams we work with always stay in control. We discussed compliance before, auditability. These are integral to what we do. Every action that the system takes is completely trackable, auditable, ensuring that both finance teams and even external auditors, by the way, are able to confidently rely on the output of our work by maintaining that full visibility. And I think lastly, the key to adoption we found is progressive automation. So that sort of an approach allows team to validate the work that AI is doing, those AI-driven decisions, prior to scaling them in a full-blown way across their entire workflows and processes.
So you're effectively allowing your clients to walk before they run.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's absolutely correct to say.
And I think that's super helpful, specifically in the accounting field where people are, let's say, open-minded, but notoriously stubborn when it comes to changing processes. Leading them to the promised land can take months, if not years. And, regardless of whether they know the answer is right, there's a lot of hesitation in one, just questioning what will it mean for their job security? What will it mean for if they have to stand behind the numbers? Right now they have a process they're confident in how they can validate it. And then we're going to have a new software in here that they didn't build, telling the management's right. I think it's a fair hesitation, but we got to keep moving forward, right?
Absolutely. I think for a lot of the companies that we support, it is a necessity. There is no other way for them to continue supporting the increased scaling of their companies without relying on technology to a certain extent, let alone to a very meaningful extent.
Yeah, it used to be you just throw more people at the problem, right? You just have more bookkeepers, more staff accountants. Everyone gets a piece of the business. They're doing their postings, their reconciliations, and then you hope at the end of the month that everything got posted so you could do a quick close. But the volume of transactions these days is, just increases at such a massive rate that getting someone up to speed as quickly as technology just isn't possible. Is that right? Is that how you approach it?
That's absolutely that. That really resonates with me, of course, but also I think with many of our customers who themselves repeat that same thing. They even call out the fact that it's not just a linear increase in workload correlated with the growth of their businesses, but complexity by now having multiple lines of business, multiple entities, geos, currencies.
Yep.
Each one of these permutations of complexity is an exponential increase in the workload. And when you put all that together, it really gets to the point of finance teams, unfortunately, often just being unable to support the business. And instead of finance doing what I think you and I definitely agree that they can be doing and providing strategic value, they're focusing so much on just taking care of the very basics to keep the lights on or in our realm, the books closed and accurate in a timely manner.
Yeah, in this day and age, it's so many accountants still becomes real life examples of the stereotype. Desks with papers stacked, feet high, constantly behind on work, and the hesitation to adopt technology is a root cause of that. It's not the only cause, but it could help alleviate, 30, 40% of the workload. And so, it's one of those situations where we're at now is there's a lot of opportunities out there to improve the process. The question is, are you going to do something about it? And then what is the right solution for you and your business?
Absolutely.
And so who are the ideal clients for Ledge, and how do you think about your go-to-market?
We work with finance teams at mid-market and enterprise-sized companies who operate at scale, which directly touches on the previous point I think you just made. We work with companies that really are now either already at a point of operating with a high transaction volume or getting to that point, thinking through how can they make those investments so that they're scale proof, so that they're always audit ready, so that their books are actually a click away from being closed at the end of the quarter, at the end of the month, at the end of the year as well. This concept of continuous accounting, I think, is one that's continuous close, is one that's more relevant than ever.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So taking a step back and looking at your career overall, what would you say is the best decision that you made in your career?
Best decision is early on, start of my career, I joined a corporate venture capital fund, Intel Capital, which is Intel's in-house VC. First exposure to the combination of tech, which I love, and finance, which is kind of my profession as well. And I think that set me up amazingly well in terms of how to approach different types of decisions. It's a perspective of an associate at an investment firm makes you think critically about different business decisions. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. I am.
Yeah, awesome. Now, if we check back with you in a year, which I definitely hope we do, what's one major change you hope to see in how finance teams operate? And it can be related to Ledge or outside.
So I think it's also related to Ledge, but not just. I think, as we discussed, being able to do much, much, much more with either the existing resources or even less is a necessity nowadays. And that has to be done through automation, through technology, finding areas, finding places where you can be comfortable with doing so. I think can add tremendous value. Silicon Valley now is all excited about this concept of a solo founder, an employee, and at a unicorn. And I think that that's not something that exists today. I think that reality where we'll see a single finance leader and operator within even a vast kind of substantial organization leveraging tech to keep the company's finances exactly where they need to be able to add strategic value, to serve as a strategic advisor to the CEOs of the board, which is, I think, what we all like to think of finance leaders as actually intending to do. That future is not too far away. Maybe not a year away, but a few years out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's no option. We'd like to think of finance leaders. I like to think of finance leaders as finance professionals that are more on the strategic side, and then you have the accounting professionals that are responsible for getting the books done. And both are required in order to run a business. Well, on the traditional accounting side, the structural state of CPAs in the United States is a very old population. 75% of CPAs in the United States are within retirement age, and there's not enough graduating accountants to replenish the supply. And so if you think about running a business, the supply of accountants to get your books done right on a regular basis is shrinking every day. And so you're either going to find solutions to operate your business with technology, or maybe you'll find a unicorn of someone that can just work 100-hour weeks to get it done, or use best-in-class technology to leverage. So I think it's a requirement as well. I'm with you there. So,
yeah, I really couldn't agree more.
Awesome. So let's take us out with a couple rapid fire questions here. We like to ask all our guests. So what is one tool or software that you can't work without?
I love Superhuman for lightning fast email automation. Yeah, absolutely love it.
Cool. What's the best piece of financial advice you ever received?
I'd say two things. The first is just obviously be aware of the power of compounding returns, which I think everyone can agree with. And the second is to figure out what's good enough for yourself, for the company. One of my managers early on in my career was very well compensated, and he always talked about that kind of notion as a guiding principle whenever he had to buy a new car. And I loved the fact that he would say, you know what, this is good enough for me. I don't need to keep increasing my reference point indefinitely into the future.
Yeah, just a lifestyle inflation is a real thing when it comes to personal and business. So to the extent that you can keep costs low, gives you a lot more optionality. What's one common financial pitfall startups should avoid?
So especially for startups, I think it's critical for venture-backed companies, especially, to have a long-term view, and long-term always goes from kind of your next fundraising round plus a buffer to where you are today, of course. So have that long-term view when doing financial planning and work backwards from it. And I think the few instances where you see companies don't really have that perspective, that North Star in mind, is when you'll see mistakes being made.
What book has impacted your approach to business or finance?
Again, I'm going to go with two. The first is the goal on ongoing kind of improvement on a process standpoint. The second is Barbarians at the Gate, about the LBO, the leveraged buyout of RJR Nabisco. I just love that book. Such an incredible story, and one that's told in an unbelievably compelling way.
Awesome. And do you have any last minute advice for financial professionals entering the job market these days?
I think especially for people entering the job market today, be at the forefront. Because as you said, the profession is changing for a lot of different reasons. Be at the forefront, think through automation, tech, how you can leverage these. I think it's an actual competitive advantage for people just entering the industry. Yeah.
Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you or Ledge?
Ledge.co. And anyone, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to continue the conversation, of course.
Amazing. Tal, thanks so much, and looking forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jeff. This was great.
Thanks for tuning in to 5 to 50. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with other business owners looking to grow. Do you have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Connect with us on LinkedIn or reach out to us at ProSeer, where we're empowering entrepreneurs with real-time, actionable insights and financial infrastructure through smarter accounting, tax, and financial strategies. Let's keep this conversation going. Together, we'll help our businesses thrive. Talk to you soon.